Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in with us again today. We're going to have a great conversation about marijuana and the impacts it may have on society, but also whether or not it should become legal in the state of Wisconsin. So we're going to start with, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves, and we're going to start with Gary Sherman.
Hi, I am Gary Sherman, and I am a retired judge. I sat on the Wisconsin Court of Appeals in District 4, which sat in Madison for about 10 years. And before that, I spent 12 years in the Wisconsin legislature in the state assembly, the last 2 of which I was on the Joint Committee on Finance. And before that, I practiced law for 30 years or more, and was in the course of that president of the State Bar of Wisconsin.
And you are in Port Wing,
I
right
am.
on the south shore of Lake Superior, right, Gary?
Yes, I've been here since 1973.
Yeah. And Donn Dexter.
Hi, I'm Don Dexter. I'm a physician, originally from Minnesota. Please don't hold that against me. Served in the Navy for 4 years, came back to the University of Minnesota on the GI Bill. While in college, worked for the St. Paul Police Department as a property clerk, then attended medical school, residency, and my fellowship in Rochester, Minnesota. Came to Eau Claire, Wisconsin 28 years ago, and have worked here ever since. I'm very active with the Wisconsin Medical Society and the American Academy of Neurology, and I serve on advocacy committee for the Academy of Neurology, and I was the chief medical officer for the Wisconsin Medical Society. I am here today just representing myself, although I'm happy to share the views of the Wisconsin Medical Society, absolutely not sharing the views of my employer, or I might be prematurely retired.
That's right. We can appreciate that, Don. Thanks a lot. And Joe Bragger, how are you today?
I'm great. Unlike Don, I had to change. My outfit from planting was probably a little dustier and dirtier than that white suit. So I farm in western Wisconsin here in the Driftless area in Buffalo County. We have about 350 cows. We also raise 32,000 pullets with my wife, and my brother also has broilers. We raise trout for the DNR that are stocked in local streams, and we have a really long and strong conservation legacy on this farm, working to preserve the environment. Along with that, we look for different opportunities to diversify our farming operation, to diversify the products we grow, and the opportunities we have to even more sustain our farm. So we're looking forward to having some discussion here. And I've also reached out to Extension in Oregon with some facts that I'd be happy to share on what has happened out there with their marijuana programs.
I appreciate that, Don. You know, Joe, as long as we got you talking here, why don't you start us out with telling us what the impacts would be on marijuana legalization in Wisconsin from your perspective and your industry?
Well, for agriculture, and oftentimes we use the word agriculture industry, so I think it's probably relevant to share a couple quick facts. As I reached out to Oregon, right now the THC cannabis employed 28,000 Oregonians in 2020 and is expected to increase. Most are in retail and manufacturing. Thing to understand is someone is growing it, whether it's in a greenhouse or otherwise. I know a dairy cow, it's every dairy cow, the dollar is generated 6 times. In cannabis, it is 2.4 times. And if we look at a nationwide analysis here that was published by Leafly and Whitney Economics, there were 321,000 legal plant hands touching, that many people working in the industry in 2020. This is, let me go back and probably talk a little quick here. This is an increase of 77,000 jobs since 2019. And that's despite the pandemic. It's the fastest growing job market in the US and has more jobs than electrical engineers. So if we talk from an industry standpoint, again, as we farm, we grow things, we look for opportunity to grow products, And those products are always further processed down the line, not only benefiting farmers, but everyone who has a hand in making it.
That's a lot of information, Joe. Thanks for that. I don't think a lot of people realize all those numbers. And Don, coming from the health industry, how do you think marijuana would impact our medical end of things?
Sure. So a couple of things. One, I think, and this is probably a better question for Judge Sherman, but decriminalization is strongly supported by the Wisconsin Medical Society. We worry about how this has been, sentencing has been inappropriately applied to certain groups, and it probably doesn't have the risk to be criminalized. The Medical Society and me personally, I'm agnostic to legalization of marijuana. I think that there are some, as you've seen with some drugs that have been made from THC used for seizures, there may be some real positives. We've been really hampered by the fact that it's a Schedule I substance and we can't do research on it. So there's no clear formulation. It's not a drug that can be prescribed. Even in states that have allowed medical marijuana, which is a misnomer that we strongly oppose, we don't prescribe it. We certify that a patient has a condition, a qualifying condition. I think it puts physicians in a terrible situation. So on the positive side, there may be some uses for this if we have the opportunity to research it. There've been some promising work done in as an antidote to nausea for chemotherapy, for example. There may be some uses in anxiety or depression, but we've been hampered by the inability to do research. On the downside, we have seen some emergence of some new syndromes. There's been the hyperemesis syndrome with marijuana, people that have intractable vomiting. And we've seen some disturbing reports of children getting into their parents' gummies and coming in with massive overdoses. Kids don't tolerate the substance as well as adults, apparently. And so anything that we do, we probably have to make sure that there is some responsibility on the person who has the substance to protect others that shouldn't be getting it.
Well, again, Don, you just vetted even myself with things I did not realize that you were encountering from the medical field. And the gummy part, I just had a conversation with some sheriffs about that was brought up, that I think we have to, a lot of things have to be thought of thoroughly through. We can't make it that inviting to children, just like we shouldn't have candy cigarettes anymore, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So Judge Sherman, this really does impact the courts, doesn't it?
Well, it impacts a lot of things. Let me start with a little full disclosure, which is that back in about 1975, I was arrested for growing marijuana in my wife's garden. So we had a dozen 6 foot tall, very pretty plants. And I could say to our friend from Extension that it's a beautiful plant to grow. And I will also say, in complete disclosure, I haven't smoked marijuana in at least 30 years. So I guess I'm on both sides of the coin. That also answers your question about how my attitude has changed. The biggest problem, a couple of problems I see from a legal point of view. One of which is that whenever you have laws that don't reflect the moral judgment of the community, you're creating disrespect for law as an institution. In spite of my criminal history, I have devoted, the last 45 years of my life to the idea that law is a critical institution in the maintaining of civil society. So I think, to me, that's the most important thing, is that our laws should reflect what our population believes, especially since we are a democracy, at least in theory. And I think that the other major thing is what Dr. Dexter pointed out, which is that our laws are not evenly applied. There isn't really any question about it. Some like I paid a $250 fine. That was it. Okay, and certainly I had a sufficient quantity that they could have charged me with a felony and sent me off behind bars if they had wanted to, but they didn't want to. Okay, if I had been a black kid on the south side of Milwaukee, I would have gone to prison. And I think that is one of the major injustices of the whole thing, is that it is, like a lot of things, an opportunity for discriminatory enforcement.
Yeah, I think that has definitely had a huge parts of this discussion these days and argument. Well, you mentioned to begin with, Gary, how important it is to follow the consensus of the public, right? So around 9 in 10 Americans favor some form of marijuana legalization. What that looks like, I guess, is up to us policymakers. But according to an April 2021 Pew Research Center survey, they found that to be the case. So what would you say to 1 of 10 Americans that aren't supportive of this endeavor, Gary?
Oh, this is a democracy. I think that is so disproportionate to the level of public support that something needs that actually 1 in 10 is hardly really relevant from my point of view.
Yeah, and Dr. Dexter, what
Well,
do you
I think I would agree with the judge. I mean, that's a super majority that favor legalization. And we've had our experience with prohibition; it didn't go very well. And the war on drugs has been a pretty dramatic failure. So, I mean, in my opinion, it hasn't really gone very well. The other issue is that we're surrounded by states that have varying levels of legality. And I saw an ad recently for, marijuana tourism to the Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It looked like a pretty attractive place to go. I guess if everybody around us is doing it, maybe what we've always done in this state, let's do it here better. But that would be legalization and not medical marijuana, which is a terrible misnomer.
Yeah, so I actually bring that up quite a bit these days, is that Minnesota's on the verge, actually, of legalizing recreational marijuana. And I know that the sheriffs they have to enforce the law when you have people crossing the border or going over the bridge and coming back in a different condition than they left, right? So Joe, have you thought about that, that 9 and 10, and I know you actually raise hemp. I think I mentioned that earlier, and I think this has some effect on that hemp farming as well, right?
Well, certainly it's because of the legal levels of THC that are allowed in the hemp are so very low, yet farmers are running into difficulty with, what it could be based on growing conditions. It can be based on seed. That's a very tight margin. And I see there's lately been some ruling on maybe some more flexibility for the growers who are growing hemp, because previous to that, the entire crop had to be destroyed with a positive test. But one of the things that I think of is, and this would be maybe back to Don or Gary as well, but I know in Oregon right now, 75%, it's another one of the statistics, marijuana is now able to be obtained through legal means. And the thing that intrigues me, I know as a dairy farmer, our milk is 3.5 fat, 3.1 protein. If you think of a can of beer, you think of medicines, they become standardized. And so when you're purchasing something through a legal means, and this can be developed, do we not have a better system, knowing what doses are, knowing what somewhat expectancy of the effects, than folks picking this stuff up on the street that could be contaminated with whatever?
So I'm going to wrap it up with I'm going to start it out with, and let each of you add your piece too, because I can tell you that my opinion has changed over the years. I'm still not someone who smokes. I've never smoked. I've always had a bias against smoke in my face, and then the smell, and then of course just the image, and I think the stigma that was attached to marijuana. But that's the part that has changed for me. I'd be interested, Joe, for instance, how about you? Is there any changes in your opinion, you think, over the years on marijuana?
Well, to be clear, I was young once. No different than the judge. But you're right about the stigma. There's a very strong stigma that can come with that. And so seeing what's happening in other states, seeing the irony that you could possibly go to Minnesota, for sure, Illinois, wherever folks are coming back from Colorado, and it seems to be a regular market, bringing things to Wisconsin. It seems kind of disjointed. And certainly my acceptance of this has changed over time.
How about you, Don?
Well, like Joe, I was young once, but when I got into this profession, there are pretty strict rules, and so it's not something that I have any involvement with. Again, my personal feeling, my personal opinion as just a citizen, as a physician who's interested, I think Joe hit really an important point. If we were to make it legal, there might be a chance to standardize and check safety and purity, which is something that really bothers me. So when I weigh the pros and the cons, just from a safety standpoint, I think I would lean towards legalizing it so there would be some standards and some, doing it the right way, the Wisconsin way, and making it safer for people. I think my strong feeling would be as if we tax it, which I suppose we should, that some of that tax money goes into clear studies to see what are the impacts down the road. There are a lot of unanswered questions about driving safety, how this is going to affect employment, and a lot of questions that are going to come up that need to be investigated. And I think we're going to have to closely monitor it. If we find out that, boy, Dexter was way wrong, this isn't as harmless as he thought, we should be able to, reframe that argument.
I fully agree with what you guys have said so far, and I'll get to you in a minute, Gary, but I got to add that my colleague, Senator Agard, who has authored the bill to legalize, always likes to say that the most dangerous thing about marijuana is that it's illegal. And I think that's exactly what you guys are referring to, that it's not in the daylight, and it's not standardized, and it's not regulated. So you don't know what you're getting. So Gary, you get to wrap it up here with what your thoughts about, and you already mentioned some of your past, but has your opinion changed over the years, and where do you think we're going with this?
Well, I tell you, I've always known that anytime you put a hazardous substance into your body, that it's not healthy. I think that's true of alcohol. It's true of tobacco. It's true of other things that are already legal. But I also think it's important that we make it clear, if we legalize this, that we're not saying that it's harmless. I would be the last person in the world to claim it was harmless. So I think that's the first thing about my attitude that may have changed with maturity, is that I recognize that it carries some deleterious effect on the body. I also agree with what you said, actually with what Melissa says, that the most dangerous thing about illegal drugs in general is the fact that they're illegal. It creates a huge profit motive. It creates large criminal enterprises, which are often heavily armed and dangerous. It really increases, as prohibition did. It increases the level of criminality in society in a way that's really not healthy for society. So I think, one of the things that I believe is it'd be a good idea to legalize these things just to undercut the illegal market, which is supporting a heck of a lot of really bad characters. So
I appreciate all of what all of you have said. It's very wise, something for us all to take back and think about, as especially now that it came so close until possibly the Joint Finance Committee has rejected it, the idea, right, at least for now. And we'll see where it goes from there. But thank you all for being with me today. I hope that those who are listening, you gave them food for thought as well. And have a good day and be safe.